roll on here, and this is probably the most well-known category of buffoon out there in the world. Everyone hates hypocrisy. I don't need to explain to you the definition of hypocrisy, even though I have it in the book, Schnooks, Crooks, Lies, and Scoundrels, a field guide to identifying political buffoons. You know where to find it and all that. The hypocrite, we obviously know what the deal is. They are so far gone from being sort of the agenda gymnast. Actually, any one of those lesser hypocrites, the BS buffoon that we talked about, the one we bless your heart and all that, the hot mess, the narcissist, or the agenda gymnast that we talked about, they can all become hypocrites just by maintaining a higher level of whatever, I guess we'll call it entry-level buffoon. You know, those categories like the marijuana, a buffoon, the gateway drug into becoming into harder drugs, those are the gateways to becoming hypocrites. Because the hypocrite is so far gone, they don't even bother trying to defend when they are using a double standard or they're trying to go after someone for something that they themselves do or whatever the case may be that is their brand of hypocrisy.
Yeah, and with all fairness, I would say the majority of the Democratic Party are hypocrites just by their nature. But surprisingly, I'm going to throw a lot of Republican names out there.
We're going to, absolutely, because I was about to say the majority of rhinos, the so-called Republicans in name only, are also hypocrites. You can throw Lindsey Graham's name in there just as much as you can throw in anyone else's name in there. I do want to get to the ones that we sort of talked about before. So one of my favorite hypocrites that we could talk about is our boy Morning Joe. We already nominated him for the hack. Morning Joe, according to Newsbusters, had the most hypocritical quote of the year. And we sort of played it last time when we talked about the hack, but let's revisit it now. This is from March of this year when Morning Joe was talking about how mentally fit Joe Biden was.
A couple of hours with Joe Biden sitting, talking, going around the world as far as talking issues, talking the economy, talking inflation. And I must say, when I was talking to him, my thought wasn't, oh, poor guy. My thought was, oh, my God, I wish Dr. Brzezinski were on the other side of the table right now, because these two guys, 50 years of experience, and Joe Biden hasn't forgotten it. He may get pissed off at a press conference, and he may be thinking about the Mexican border deal and say Mexico instead of Egypt. He knows what he's talking about. He circles back around, gets to Egypt. He might misplace a word here and there, but you talk to him for hours at a time. Is he slower? Does he move slower? Yeah, he's moved slower. Is he stiffer? Yeah, he moves stiffer. Does he have trouble walking sometimes? Yeah, so did FDR. We got out of the Depression. We won a GD war. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
And that ending part there was part of that quote. He prefaces by saying, hey, zoom in your camera right here and listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah, he said, zoom in your camera, get out your pens, write this down.
Yeah. And we as you saw there, we covered that on This Week in Dumbocracy, which I hope you guys tune into in 2025. By liking, sharing, subscribing to this channel, you can help others find clips like that, where we actually covered the worst quote, the most hypocritical quote in 2024. Does that qualify Morning Joe to be the hypocrite of 2024? The fact that he was covering so much for Joe Biden and then not only abandoned that when Biden was taken out in that palace coup, but then after the election starts trying to buddy up to Trump.
Which is even worse because you left out a major part. Night after night after night, he was calling Donald Trump a fascist and all MAGA supporters fascists. And then he went to go kiss the ring and meet with him and said he would work with him. You don't call someone Hitler and then say, well, I might be able to work with this guy after he wins an election. You don't say he's a threat to democracy and then say we're going to have a peaceful transition of power to him.
And by the way, let's remind everybody what we're talking about with this clip from Morning Joe.
Oh, my God.
Oh, I don't know. We won't call them fascist comments. Fascism, fascist, call fascism, just fascist. Fascist
notions of fascism, xenophobic, racist, demagogic, racist, sexist, xenophobic, autocratic, and fascistic. Donald Trump is a fascist.
Someone like a fascist or a tyrant or an autocrat.
Fascist rhetoric, fascist language, fascists.
I'm glad that you're starting talking about fascism. Hitler.
Right. Fascist rhetoric, he's talking the way fascists talk. It's autocratic, fascist in Nazi Germany before the rise of Hitler. Fascist language.
To Hitler, fascist, Hitler. Adolf Hitler.
Hitler. But Hitler.
From what Adolf Hitler preached in the early 30s. Let's just say it once and for all.
And again, that's brought to us by Tom Elliott and Grabby, and they make some great stuff over there. Tom is awesome. Check him out on Twitter at Tom S. Elliott. That's what you were talking about. He definitely did all that for many, many years, almost nearly a decade. And now he's trying to remain in the game, and he's acting totally hypocritical. I think he definitely qualifies. We can basically indict every single Democrat when it comes to this year's Hypocrite, when they were all using the same violent rhetoric. Now, I know you don't subscribe to this theory so much, but when you have an election season, when everyone is calling Donald Trump an existential threat to democracy, democracy on the ballot, democracy is under attack, and then some lunatic, or lunatics, I should say, go out and try to unalive the once and future president, you got to call people hypocrites who kept using that rhetoric, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with the health insurance CEO shooting with this guy Luigi Mangione, right? A lot of the left, including like Elizabeth Warren, saying things like, I don't support violence at all, but...
And what happens when you turn this into the billionaires run it all is they get the opportunity to squeeze every last penny.
Yeah.
And look, we'll say it over and over. Violence is never the answer. This guy gets a trial who's allegedly killed the CEO of United Health. But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
So you are supporting violence, right? Like, I just want to clarify a point that you made, or my position. I do not believe that if someone gets shot because of something Elizabeth Warren said, she should be held accountable at all. I don't think so. But in the game that we play, where they're constantly saying that things we say lead to violence, or sometimes they say that things we say are actually violence, right? Then the game has to be for both of us, right? So I'm a fan of blaming them and throwing stones because they do it to us. But in reality, my real position is, obviously, whatever someone says, it's the person to blame who's behind the trigger, right?
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I strawmanned you there. I didn't mean to do that.
No, I get what you're saying, because it's kind of probably too nuanced for me to even explain.
Well, it's like saying that the Capitol baseball shooter that was a Bernie bro and supported Bernie Sanders doesn't mean that Bernie Sanders is responsible for that shooting.
I think it's fair to bring it up whenever they say things Donald Trump said is leading people to violence. Then it's definitely fair to say, well, what about things Bernie Sanders said that led that guy to violence, right? But I don't really believe that. That guy was a nut.
Right. Either they're both wrong or no one's wrong,
Yes.
right? Look, I did put in a clip. Frankly, I don't even remember the clips I put in because we're doing this as a take two. But this clip says Biden rhetoric short, so I'm going to play it.
You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye.
That seems kind of extreme.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him.
Which doesn't sound any better.
But have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Initiate flashback!
I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him. Talks about the blood of America is being poisoned. Echoing the same exact language used in Nazi Germany. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
So what do you think?
Look, I've not engaged in that rhetoric.
Are you stupid or something?
It's called political buffoonery.
I'm glad these clips tickle you, but there is
that was a great mashup.
there is a serious point to be made from all this. Joe Biden can't be buffoon of the year because he's president and we exempt the president and the vice president from competition because they're always buffoons all the time. And to include them would mean that they would win basically every single category. So we don't want to do that. We want to breed competition. But when it starts from the top, it trickles down throughout the party. Joe Biden gave everyone license to call Donald Trump a threat. When you call someone a threat, there will be people out there that support you that would want to eliminate the threat. You made the example of that guy, Luigi Mangione, right? How he went after the CEO from healthcare. There's a copycat out there right now that I think was stopped because someone went to stab another CEO today. Those people got the idea because they see insurance costs being high and they see far left extremists talking about that being violence against poor people.
Yes.
As an example of extreme rhetoric leading to extreme action.
I think it was AOC that said,
it's really important that we take a step back. This is not to comment, and this is not to say that an act of violence is justified. But I think for anyone who is confused or shocked or appalled, they need to understand that people interpret and feel and experience denied claims as an act of violence against them.
You left-wing nutjobs out there, take note of this. Look up what the word existential threat actually means, right? The words. Existential, the very existence. So when they say things like our country, or Donald Trump is an existential threat to our democracy, our country, or my SUV is an existential threat to planet Earth, just know that they're full of shh. You know what I mean? They're full of it. Don't fall for it.
Yeah, you say shh, I'll say it.
Good.
We put it all together right there. I agree with you totally, pal. So if anyone that was using extreme rhetoric out there and then was pearl clutching whenever somebody says the least little bit of possibly maybe threatening thing in a rhetorical sense, they're hypocrites.
And just real quick, Gene, how more extreme can you get in your rhetoric than calling people fascist and saying that they're going to end democracy, right? Like, you don't get any more extreme than that. So when they say like, oh, both sides use extremist rhetoric, really? Like, one side says, hey, man, these guys are like communists, because they are. And the other side is saying, like, this guy is going to destroy the democracy and be a dictator.
Let's talk on the lighter side of hypocrisy. A little bit on the lighter side, I'm going to throw all these Ivy League presidents under the bus here. We talk about the buffoons a lot on this channel because, you know, it's the name of the channel, Buffoon of the Week or whatever. But there were a lot of heroes fighting the fight against buffoonery. One of them is the future U.S. ambassador to the UN, Elise Stefanik, who basically picked off, and maybe that's too violent language for everybody, but caused the resignation of several Ivy League presidents by calling out their hypocrisy about what was going on campus concerning Israeli students and their treatment and students who were pro-Hamas protesting on campuses. And I'll put a clip of that in right here on replay.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment.
What does that even mean?
Specifically calling for the genocide of Jews, does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
yes
speech
or
becomes
no?
if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Well, we're waiting.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
God damn it, not this shit again.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, targeted at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
But let's talk about these Ivy League presidents. Harvard, I believe, was one. MIT was another. UPenn, I think, might have been a third. I have to go back and check. But by calling them out on their policies towards these protests, it gained a lot of traction, I think, for Republicans in this election cycle to call out that hypocrisy.
Yeah. And the hypocrisy was so astounding because of what they claim to be, right? Like, that's obviously the definition of hypocrisy. They claim that their campuses, and they all bought into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They all bought into that, and they claim this mantle of diversity and tolerance. But what they really mean is like racism, because it's diversity except, I guess, for Jews, Asians, whites, women playing in women's sports, right? It's diversity, equity, and inclusion except for them, which doesn't make sense. It's diversity of the color of your skin pigmentation, but not your thoughts. They're supposed to teach you how to think, not what to think. And they were total hypocrites on all I just said.
You know, I went to Manhattan University for my undergrad, and I had a mentor, political science professor, shout out to Dr. Winsome Downey, who was as liberal could be when you were living in the late 90s. She never stopped me from exploring my own point of view when it came to what side of the aisle I was going to be on. I worked for Democrats, I worked for Republicans in college, and she allowed me to grow within the learning tree that she was from the point of view of, she gave me the analytical tools to be able to make decisions about policy that I believed in. And that's what's lost on campus today.
Yeah, because she was a classic liberal, right? The word liberal, if you look it up, like what was a classical liberal? People who were more open-minded. Today's left, they're not liberals. I'm glad they actually changed their name to progressives. It still sounds too good for what they actually are, because they're just progressively going further left into communist totalitarian land.
Oh, absolutely. I've divided the left now into three categories: Democrats, liberals, and leftists. That's how I see them now. And I think they go into a descending madness as you go from Democrat to liberal to leftist. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I know you think I'm too nice, but that's how I handle those hypocrites. But the hypocrisy in Ivy Leagues didn't just end there, because at the end of the year, after Trump won the election, how did campuses react? They had to coddle all the snowflakes. Let me show you this clip, pal. Just lean over to the side towards your blinds, and everyone will see both us and the clip.
This is an example of what a professor sent to students at Columbia. I have decided to cancel our class today. I had planned an alternative lecture on modern polling methods and their blind spots. It feels a bit tone deaf to deliver it today.
What a load of crap.
This is a Harvard professor as well. As we recover from the eventful election night, this is crazy. Is this a disease or something? And process the implications of Trump's victory. Please know that class will proceed as usual today, except the classroom quizzes will not be for credit. Feel free to take some time off as needed.
What the fuck, man? This was in the Princetonian. We have been hearing about lots of anxiety from students about the election and felt like listening circles, oh my goodness. Listening circles can be a helpful way to allow students to process and get support from one another.
Okay, whatever. Screw you, snowflakes.
This is a weird group of people, and they call us weird.
The hypocrisy of this intelligentsia is that during this election cycle, all of the quote-unquote educated people on the left were calling supporters of Donald Trump weirdos and outside of mainstream thought and all that. When they're the ones that need listening circles or time off from lectures in order to cope with the reality of an election. We want to talk about weird.
Yeah.
Those are the weirdos.
You also want to talk about hypocrisy, Gene. The professors and the administrators at these Ivy League schools are all earning high 6- and 7-figure salaries. The tuition costs at those higher places of education are through the roof. They have huge tax-free endowments. They receive federal funding, student loan forgiveness they keep advocating for. And it's all because their students graduate with these dumb degrees and can't find good paying jobs, right? Talk about hypocrisy.
Oh, it's totally hypocrisy. And who ends up paying for it? Those uneducated, quote unquote, skilled laborers who don't have the benefit of the tax advice or anything like that we see out with more professional people and things like that. They're getting stuck with the bill. And by the way, you didn't even mention tenure. You didn't even mention lifetime employment that they, quote unquote, earn because they wrote their PhD thesis on, the patterns of migratory birds in Saskatchewan or whatever the hell they're doing.
Tenure, federal grants to do research, legacy admissions.
Sabbaticals.
Which is the most racist thing you can have, right?
Yeah, sabbaticals. and these institutions, we talked about this last year a little bit, try to defend their racist admissions policies when like Harvard turns away Asian students because they're just too smart.
Yeah.
So they can be racist, they can be misogynist, they can act and do whatever they want and pursue their flights of fancy. But then when it comes to how the rest of the country is living, they have to have a say in that as well. And it's got to be normal and reasonable according to what they think is normal and reasonable. Mr. Galloway has some last-minute nominees for hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to break his own 11th commandment.
I'm going to have to tonight because it broke my heart to see this, even though it was so foreseeable. I knew this was going to happen. The Republicans are useless. I don't know how many times I have to tell you guys this. The Republican Party is useless. Specifically, Congressmen Chip Roy, Nancy Mace, and Thomas Massie. They voted against the skinny CR tonight, right? And helped it sink. The reason they're giving is because it kept spending levels the same as was in the past. I don't know, like, if they give them a class when they become congressmen. A continuing resolution means you keep funding the government at the same level in order to avoid a shutdown until you could pass an actual budget, which they keep failing to do. That's their job. They keep failing to do it. So what will happen? There was a ridiculous continuing resolution, which really wasn't. It was more of an omnibus continuing resolution because it included new spending that dumbass Speaker Mike Johnson put on the table the other day. That one went down in flames because of Elon and some other people, including Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. A new one gets submitted today, 167 pages long, trimmed down, basically just does some funding for the hurricane and continues government spending into next month until Trump takes office and a new Congress is seated. And these Republicans, along with 38 of their friends, voted against it. So now what happens real quick, Gene? What happens is Johnson, who is not good to begin with, has no other option but to court Democrats to come on board with the vast majority of Republicans who are trying to keep the government funded until Trump takes office. So now, instead of getting what they kind of wanted, they're going to get none of what they wanted. And I'm just going to leave with this because it's so poignant. Ronald Reagan once said, if you got 75 or 80% of what you're asking for, I say you take it and fight for the rest later, right? All these people that claim to be like constitutional conservatives and Ronald Reagan Republicans, they never take a win, ever. They will grasp defeat out of the jaws of victory every single fucking time. The Republicans are useless.
And the Republicans showed how useless they were right around the same time last year when we were talking about who's going to be the Speaker of the House. We should have known that this would be happening again and again, but I did not think with a Trump victory in the popular vote, with a Trump victory in the Electoral College, with Trump coattails bringing the House, I should say, keeping the House in Republican control and wresting control of the Senate, I did not think that we'd be seeing this sort of turmoil that we saw last year. Let's just remind everyone what happened with these Republicans, quote unquote, last year when it came to getting a House Speaker after Matt Gaetz took down Kevin McCarthy.
Scalise has just hit the majority of the House Republicans. They have voted for him to be the nominee on the House floor for a Speaker.
That's good.
I just shared with my colleagues that I'm withdrawing my name as a candidate for the Speaker designee.
Ooh, that's bad.
Republicans voted to nominate staunch conservative Jim Jordan of Ohio.
That's good.
A few minutes ago, the House Republican Conference met privately, and via secret ballot, they have voted to yank his nomination from him.
That's bad.
Representative Tom Emmer has won the Republican nomination for Speaker.
That's good.
Moments ago, Tom Emmer of Minnesota, the latest to lead the pack of candidates for House Speaker, dropped out.
That's bad.
The next day,
Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Can I go now?
And guess what, Gene? We're in for that same ride again. The last thing, I just want to put one fine point on this thing. The reason why I'm saying Chip Roy, Nancy Mason, Thomas Massie are so bad and so hypocritical, I don't know what they think we can get onto the floor this week and get passed in the House that will also pass in the same form in the current Democrat-controlled Senate and be signed into law by the current Democrat president. Right? Like, I don't know what they think they're going to get. Right? What was put on the floor tonight and failed because of the Republicans was our best case scenario, and they blew it.
Well, let's see what Plan C is going to look like in the near future.
Plan C will be way more spending in this CR than was put on the floor earlier tonight. Guaranteed.